The stove was cold when I got there. And that's the detail I keep circling back to, because in 31 years of walking into my mother's house, the stove was never cold. Not at 2 in the afternoon on a Sunday. Not during flu season. Not after my father's funeral. Not even the week she had her gallbladder out and came home with drainage tubes pinned to her bathrobe. She cooked through all of it, sofrito sweating in the pan, rice simmering with the lid on crooked the way she insisted distributed the steam better. Some argument about garlic I'd heard 900 times. That stove was the heartbeat of her house. So when I came through the side door with a bag of oranges, and the kitchen was silent and the burners were clean, and the whole room smelled like nothing like Lysol and tile grout, my body understood something before my brain caught up. My name is Dolores Rivas, but everyone calls me Teddy. I'm 24. I run an event catering company in Milwaukee, which is a generous description of what is actually me, a rented cargo van, and 2 part-time guys I found through my cousin's church. We do quinceañeras, graduation parties, the occasional corporate thing when somebody wants authentic and is willing to pay a guy without a brick-and-mortar kitchen. I say this because my whole life is food. I think in food. I schedule in food. When I'm nervous, I prep. When I'm angry, I butcher. When I'm happy, I plate something beautiful and stand there waiting to watch someone's face when they taste it. I got it from her, obviously. Everything I know about feeding people started in that kitchen, at that stove. Zombie outbreak. My mother stopped cooking for the first time. In 30 years, that was the sign. The stove was cold when I got there. And that's the detail I keep circling back to, because in 31 years of walking into my mother's house, zombie outbreak. My mother stopped cooking for the first time. In 30 years, that was the sign. The stove was cold when I got there. And that's the detail I keep circling back to, because in 31 years of walking into my mother's house, the stove was never cold. Not at 2 in the afternoon on a Sunday. Not during flu season. Not after my father's funeral. Not even the week she had her gallbladder out and came home with drainage tubes pinned to her bathrobe. She cooked through all of it, sofrito sweating in the pan, rice simmering with the lid on crooked the way she insisted distributed the steam better. Some argument about garlic I'd heard 900 times. That stove was the heartbeat of her house. So when I came through the side door with a bag of oranges, and the kitchen was silent and the burners were clean, and the whole room smelled like nothing like Lysol and tile grout, my body understood something before my brain caught up. My name is Dolores Rivas, but everyone calls me Teddy. I'm 24. I run an event catering company in Milwaukee, which is a generous description of what is actually me, a rented cargo van, and 2 part-time guys I found through my cousin's church. We do quinceañeras, graduation parties, the occasional corporate thing when somebody wants authentic and is willing to pay a guy without a brick-and-mortar kitchen. I say this because my whole life is food. I think in food. I schedule in food. When I'm nervous, I prep. When I'm angry, I butcher. When I'm happy, I plate something beautiful and stand there waiting to watch someone's face when they taste it. I got it from her, obviously. Everything I know about feeding people started in that kitchen, at that stove, standing on a step stool at age 5 with my hand around a wooden spoon while she corrected my wrist angle. So when the stove was cold, I didn't think, oh, she's resting. I didn't think she went out. I thought, something is wrong in a way I don't have a name for. She was sitting in the living room with every curtain drawn and the television off. Just sitting, hands flat on her knees. My mother is not a sitting still person. Dolores Rivas has never in her life been between tasks. She's either doing something or moving toward the next thing she's about to do. But that Sunday, she was sitting like someone had set her down, and walked away. "Ma," I said, "you okay? I brought the oranges." She looked at me, and her face did something I'd never seen, a kind of focusing, like she was checking whether I was really standing there. Then she said, "Don't put those in the kitchen." "What?" "The oranges. Don't put them in the kitchen. Put them in the hall closet." "The inn with the coats?" "Teddy, do what I'm asking." Her voice wasn't scared. It was the voice she used when she was managing something complicated. Like when my Aunt Serafina would show up drunk at holidays, and my mother would just calmly redirect the whole room without anyone noticing, controlled, operational. But this time, I couldn't see what she was managing. I put the oranges in the hall closet. I felt stupid doing it. Then I came back and sat on the arm of the couch across from her and tried to read the room the way I read a new venue before a job: the layout, the flow, what's accessible, what's a bottleneck. The kitchen was spotless in a way it never was. Not dirty, messy. My mother kept a clean kitchen, but it was always alive. A coffee cup in the sink, a towel hung wrong over the oven handle, a lime drying out on the counter. This looked like she'd scrubbed it for a health inspection. The dish rack was empty. The little clay garlic keeper my father brought back from Oaxaca was gone from its shelf. The window over the sink was shut, and my mother always kept it cracked, even in winter, because she said a kitchen needs to breathe. "I don't want the smell," she said, like she'd followed my eyes. "Food smell carries. Outside, I don't want it carrying." "Ma, what are you talking about?" "Sit down properly." I slid off the couch arm and sat. She told me. She worked at St. Casimir's, the big church on Lincoln Avenue, running their food pantry. 4 days a week, she drove to the distribution warehouse on the south side, sorted donations, stocked the shelves, organized the volunteer rotation. She loved it. After my father died and I moved out, it became her thing, her reason to get dressed, her community, her gossip network. She knew every family that came through those doors. She knew their allergies, their kids' names, their situations. 3 Thursdays before my visit, a woman named Petronella, a regular Bosnian, had been coming for 2 years, with her grandson, showed up at the pantry and refused food. Not politely declined. Refused it physically. Flinched when my mother held out a bag of canned goods. The grandson, maybe 6 years old, just stood behind her, not talking. And the woman smelled wrong. My mother said it was like old copper, and something sweet underneath, like fruit that had turned but hadn't molded yet. I thought she was sick, my mother said. I thought maybe the chemo. She'd had breast cancer 2 years ago. I offered to drive her to the clinic. She grabbed my wrist, and her hand was very cold, and she said, "Dolores, please, the food makes it worse. The food smell makes it worse." And then she left. The next Thursday, Petronella didn't come. 6 other regulars didn't come either. My mother called 2 of them. One number was disconnected. The other rang and rang. She asked Father Madzalewski about it, and he said people come and go. Don't take it personally. Then the news started. Not the big dramatic headlines, not yet. Little things. A cluster of hospitalizations on the south side. A segment about a new strain of something respiratory. A press conference where the county health director looked like she hadn't slept in 3 days and used the word atypical 4 times. My mother watched all of it from her kitchen, stirring stock, and something about the pattern, the missing regulars, the woman who flinched from canned goods. The hospitalization cluster hit her the way a bad smell hits you when you open a walk-in fridge that lost power overnight. Not a thought. A recognition. She started paying attention differently after that. 2 Thursdays ago, A man came to the pantry she'd never seen before. Healthy-looking, well-dressed, nothing like the usual regulars. He asked specifically for high-sodium items. Canned soups, preserved meats, anything with a strong flavor profile. My mother, who could read a person's food needs the way I read a catering order, thought that was wrong. People in need take what's available. They don't request a flavor profile. She watched him carry 4 bags to a van parked on the street, and in the van, she saw someone sitting in the passenger seat who was very still and whose face, through the tinted glass, looked grayish in a way she couldn't explain. "I think people who are sick are losing their taste," she said to me in the living room. "I think the food stops working for them. The flavor, the smell. And I think at some point, the smell of other people's food starts to bother them in a way that isn't just nausea." I stared at her. "Ma, that sounds like..." "I know what it sounds like. I've been alive for 63 years, and I've fed thousands of people, and I know what hunger looks like when it changes direction. When someone who has always been hungry for food stops wanting food and starts wanting something else, you notice. You feel it." That woman grabbed my wrist and her pupils were wrong, Teddy. They were too big, and they didn't shrink when I turned the overhead light on. "When was this?" "3 weeks ago." "And you didn't call me?" "I called your brother." That landed like a slap. My brother Urbano lives in Kenosha, 45 minutes south. He's an EMT, which in my mother's mind makes him the practical one, the emergency one. I'm the one who makes tiny sandwiches for rich people. I'm the creative one, which in a Puerto Rican family is a nice way of saying the one you don't call when the roof leaks. Urbano said I was being paranoid. He said the news would tell us if it was serious. She said this flatly, without bitterness, like she was just reporting data. So I stopped talking about it and started getting ready. Getting ready. That's what the clean kitchen was. That's what the closed window was. She had emptied her refrigerator, scrubbed it with bleach, sealed all her dry goods in airtight containers, and stored them in the basement. She had disconnected the gas line to the stove herself with a wrench, which terrified me because she believed the smell of cooking was becoming a signal. A locator. Something the sick could follow. "You disconnected the gas." "I capped it. I used Teflon tape. I'm not an idiot." "Ma, I've been eating cold food for 9 days. Peanut butter, crackers, canned tuna I open in the basement with the door shut. I brush my teeth 3 times after. The toothpaste covers the smell." This was the moment where I should have done one of 2 things. Either I should have taken her seriously and started helping, or I should have gently told her this was anxiety and helped her reconnect the stove. Instead, I did neither. I sat there with my mouth open, half impressed and half scared, and I said, "Can I at least see the basement?" She showed me, and that's when I stopped thinking she was paranoid. The basement of my mother's house was always semi-finished concrete floor, drywall on 2 walls, bare bulbs, a laundry area, storage shelves my father built. Now it looked like the back room of a restaurant walk-in. She'd organized everything by category: proteins, carbohydrates, fats, vitamins. She'd labeled each shelf with painter's tape and a Sharpie in her looping handwriting. She had a 5-gallon water jug with a hand pump attached, a camping toilet still in its box, 3 flashlights with rechargeable batteries plugged into a power strip. A battery-powered radio, I know, but she had one, and it was practical, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise, and stacked against the far wall. A collection of sealed Tupperware containers that, when I opened one, contained fully prepared meals. Rice and beans portioned, chicken cooked and sealed, sofrito base in small jars, all of it cold stored without the fridge, using the basement's natural cool, packed in layers with dish towels for insulation. She had prepped enough food for 2 people for about 3 weeks. All of it cooked in a single marathon session 9 days ago, the last time she used the stove, with every window sealed with wet towels to trap the smell inside. After that, I shut it down, she said. No more heat cooking, no more smell. Ma, this is a lot. You're a caterer, Teddy. You know what a prep day looks like. This is a prep day. A prep day for what? For whatever comes after people stop being hungry the normal way. That was Sunday. By Wednesday, it wasn't a theory anymore. The news moved fast on Monday. 3 hospitals in the metro area reported surge capacity for patients presenting with extreme photosensitivity, olfactory hypersensitivity, and altered behavioral patterns. The city put out a statement that was obviously written by a lawyer, all passive voice, no agent, nobody doing anything to anybody, things just occurring and being monitored. By Tuesday morning, there was a confirmed incident at the Marquette interchange where a woman walked into moving traffic and attacked the driver of a stopped car through his open window. And the dashcam footage from a DOT camera was on every local news site before the city could take it down. By Tuesday afternoon, the governor activated the National Guard for logistical support, which everyone understood meant something worse than logistics. I was at my mother's house by then. I'd come back Monday night with my cargo van loaded with every useful thing from my apartment and my catering storage unit. Sheet pans, butane camping stoves, which I wouldn't use until I understood her smell theory better, a case of sterno, 60 pounds of dry rice, canned goods, my good knives wrapped in a roll, first aid kit, and all the water I could carry. I also brought my cat Roque in his carrier, which my mother looked at with a complicated expression. Animals might draw attention, she said. He's an indoor cat. He weighs 9 pounds. He doesn't make noise. He eats. I brought his food. She let it go. But I saw her watching Roque later, studying the way he moved through the house, and I realized she was using him as a sensor. If the cat acted wrong, she'd know something was close. My mother doesn't waste anything, including a 9-pound tabby. Urbano called that night finally. He sounded different, stripped down, like someone had sandblasted the professional calm right off him. He'd been on back-to-back shifts, and he'd seen things. He didn't describe them in detail, but he said, "Teddy, Mom was right about the smell thing. The patients we're transporting, they react to food odors, not like nausea, like aggression. One of them lunged at my partner because she'd eaten a granola bar and had the wrapper in her vest pocket." "Are you coming here?" Long pause. "I can't leave yet. The crews are short. If I walk out now, people die tonight." "Urbano." I know. Give me 2 days. Keep Mom inside. Don't cook anything." Don't cook anything. My brother, who had told our mother she was paranoid 4 days ago, was now telling me the same thing she'd told me. Something about that circular confirmation scared me more than the news did. When the people who dismissed the warning start repeating it, the window is closing. I set up in the house. My mother and I divided responsibilities with the efficiency of 2 people who'd worked a kitchen together for 20 years. She managed inventory and rationing. I managed physical security, which meant checking every window, every door, every vent. The house was a 1940s brick bungalow in the Bayview neighborhood, south side of Milwaukee, on a residential street about 4 blocks from the lake. Solid construction, small windows, 1 main entrance, 1 side door, a basement with those old glass block windows that you can't really break without serious effort. It was defensible in a way that newer houses with their big picture windows and sliding glass doors wouldn't be. But defensible against what? That was the thing. We didn't know yet. We knew people were getting sick. We knew the sick became aggressive. We knew it was spreading. We didn't know the rules. My mother, as it turned out, had been working on the rules for 3 weeks. She had a composition notebook, the kind with the black and white marbled cover, like from school, and she'd been writing in it since the day Petronella flinched at the food pantry. Not a diary. More like a field guide. Observations, organized by date, with her own shorthand annotations. She'd noted which regulars at the pantry had stopped coming and when. She'd mapped it on a city bus route map she kept in a kitchen drawer, circling the addresses she knew. The cluster was tight. South Side, mostly residential, mostly lower-income neighborhoods where people were packed in close. She'd noted what she called behavioral shifts. People she saw on her street who were moving wrong. Walking too slowly and then suddenly fast. Standing at windows without moving. One entry said, Mr. Kubilius at 2847 was mowing his lawn at 11 p.m. No lights on in house. Mower was not running. He was pushing it back and forth with no blade engaged. She'd also made food-based observations. The turned people, she called them the fasting ones, which sounds almost gentle but came from a hard place, didn't eat. But they responded to food smell with a kind of orientation behavior, like a compass needle. She'd watched from her upstairs window as a man 3 houses down stood in his backyard at dawn and slowly turned his head toward a neighbor's house where, my mother noted, someone was frying bacon. He stood there for 11 minutes. She timed it. Smell is the trigger? I asked, reading through the notebook at the kitchen table, the kitchen we weren't using, the dark kitchen that smelled like nothing. Not the only trigger, but it's the consistent one. They hear things, they see things, but the smell is what holds their attention, what makes them come closer instead of wander past. How do you know this? Because I've been watching, Teddy, for 3 weeks. While you were making canapes and your brother was telling me I needed a hobby. That stung. She meant it to. By Thursday, the city imposed a curfew. By Friday, the curfew was extended to 24 hours, which is just a lockdown they didn't want to call a lockdown. The power stayed on, which surprised me. Water still ran. But the garbage truck stopped coming on Wednesday, and by Friday, the smell of uncollected trash on the street was its own problem. It was masking everything, which in a strange way was protective. The sick couldn't isolate one food smell in a corridor of rot. I learned this from watching. My mother had taught me to watch. The first one came close on Friday night. I was in the upstairs bedroom with the lights off, looking through the gap in the curtain. Our street was mostly dark. Some houses had candles or flashlights. Most people had gotten the message to lay low, though I could see the blue flicker of a television 2 houses down, and I wanted to scream at them to turn it off. The shape came from the east, from the direction of the lake, moving along the middle of the street with that uneven gait I'd started recognizing normal steps, punctuated by small corrections, like someone walking on a surface they couldn't quite feel. It stopped in front of the house with the television, stood there, turned its head slowly, not toward the light, but up, slightly up, as if tasting the air. It stayed for maybe 3 minutes, then moved on. It passed our house without pausing. We had no light, no smell, no sound. We were a dead spot on the street, and it walked right past. My mother, standing behind me in the dark, whispered, "You see?" Saturday, Urbano called again. This time he was whispering too, and there was something behind his voice. Not panic, Urbano doesn't panic. He compartmentalizes. Which is worse, because it means when he finally cracks it'll be structural. He said his station house was being used as a staging area, that half his crew hadn't come back from runs, and that the National Guard perimeter was holding on the north side, but the south side was considered low priority for active containment, which meant they'd written us off. 2 days, you said, I told him. It's been 5. I know. Ma's got the house set up. We're okay for now. But I need you here. I can't do this by myself. You're not by yourself. You're with Ma. That's what I mean. I need you here because if something happens to me, she's alone. And if something happens to her, I can't. I stopped. Couldn't finish it. Teddy, listen, I'm going to try to get out tomorrow night. There's a crew rotation, and I think I can slip during the handoff. But I need you to do something. There's a woman here, a paramedic from Racine. Her name is Bridget Almeida. She got separated from her unit 2 days ago, and she's been sleeping in our break room. She's solid. If she gets to you before I do, let her in. Short hair, Puerto Rican flag patch on her jacket, looks about 40. Can you remember that? Bridget Almeida, flag patch. Good. And Teddy? Yeah. Ma was right, about all of it. Tell her I said that. I told her. She didn't gloat. She nodded once and went back to portioning crackers into Ziploc bags in the basement, her headlamp on low. The red filter she'd taped over it, making her look like a photograph from another century. The next 4 days taught me things about survival that I thought I already knew from catering, which sounds absurd. But the parallels were real. Catering is logistics. It's cold chain management. It's timing. It's knowing that if you run out of one thing, you can substitute, but if you run out of 2 things simultaneously, the whole service collapses. In the house on Clement Avenue, the math was the same, but the stakes were different. We had enough food for about 18 days if we stuck to the rations my mother had calculated. Water was still running, but we filled every container we had, the bathtub, every pot and pitcher, the 5-gallon jug, because we both knew that was a when not if situation. The power flickered on Saturday night and came back, flickered again Sunday morning, and came back. And then on Monday afternoon, it went out and stayed out. No power changed everything. The refrigerator was already empty, my mother had seen to that, but the loss of light at night was the real problem. We had flashlights, but used them almost never, and only in the basement with the door closed. Upstairs, we navigated by memory and by the thin gray light that came through the curtains during the day. The house became a place we moved through like water, slowly, by feel, without sound. Sound discipline, that's what my mother called it. We wore socks, never shoes, on the hardwood floors. We communicated in whispers or hand signals. She invented 1 finger up meant listen, flat palm meant stop, 2 taps on the wall meant come here. We ate cold food with our hands because even the sound of a fork on a plate seemed too loud in the silence that had settled over the neighborhood like snow. The fasting ones were getting more numerous. From the upstairs window, I could see them most clearly at dawn and dusk, moving in loose patterns through the streets. They weren't organized, not yet, but they were converging. The ones that came from the east seemed to be following the lake shore, moving south along the residential streets. The ones from the north moved in straighter lines, as if they had a destination. Sometimes, 2 of them would stop near each other and stand there, facing the same direction, perfectly still, for 20 or 30 minutes. Then one would move and the other would follow, not immediately, but after a delay, like a decision that took a long time to process. They didn't attack each other. They didn't communicate in any way I could see. but they shared something, a sensitivity, an orientation that made them feel less like individuals and more like fingers on the same hand. The first real crisis came on Tuesday, day 9 of my mother's cold kitchen, day 6 of my stay. Our neighbor to the south, a man named Gustavo, who I'd known since I was 12, started cooking. I smelled it before I understood what it was. Onions, garlic, oil heating in a pan, and my whole body responded with hunger and nostalgia and absolute terror simultaneously. "Oh God," my mother said. She was already moving, pulling on her shoes, heading for the side door. "Ma, no. He's going to bring them to the whole block. You can't go out there. Someone has to tell him. Ma." I grabbed her arm. She looked at my hand on her sleeve, and I saw something I'd never seen in my mother's face before, a calculation. Not cold, not heartless, but practical in a way that frightened me. She was weighing Gustavo's life against the block's safety, and she was doing it faster than I could form the sentence to stop her. "I'll go," I said. "You don't know the yard. I do. Ma, stay with the cat. If something happens, you go to the basement and you seal it from inside with the brackets I installed." She'd bolted 2x4s and steel L brackets to the basement door frame 3 days ago. I'd helped without fully understanding the implication until now. She'd built a last stand position. She went out the side door, moving low across the yard in the half-light of early evening. I watched from the kitchen window, my hands gripping the counter so hard my knuckles ached. She went through the gap in the chain-link fence between our properties, a gap that had been there since I was a kid, since Gustavo and my father used to pass beers through it on summer evenings, and I lost sight of her behind his garage. 3 minutes, 5, 7. The cooking smell was getting stronger. I could identify it now. Pork, seasoned, probably shoulder, which meant it had been heating for a while before I noticed. The smell would be pooling in the still evening air, spreading outward in a radius my mother could probably estimate in feet. 9 minutes. I was reaching for my shoes when she came back through the fence, moving fast, her face tight. She came in through the side door and locked it, and leaned against the wall and said, "He wouldn't listen. He said he hasn't eaten a hot meal in a week, and he's not going to let fear run his kitchen." Did you explain?" I explained. He said I was overreacting. He said his wife is sick upstairs and she needs a real meal. "His wife is sick?" My mother looked at me. "Sick," she repeated, in a tone that relocated the word from its normal meaning to somewhere much darker. "Sick, upstairs, and he's cooking for her." We sealed the house, every crack, every gap. My mother had a roll of plastic sheeting and duct tape that she'd bought before I arrived, and we sealed the kitchen window, the bathroom vent, the mail slot in the front door. We stuffed wet towels under every door. We put Roque in the basement with a blanket over his carrier to keep him quiet. Then we sat in the dark living room and waited. The cooking smell from Gustavo's house faded after about an hour. I hoped he'd eaten and turned off the stove, and that would be the end of it. Around 9 p.m., I was tracking time by my watch, the analog one my father had given me since my phone was dead. I heard something from the direction of his house. Not screaming, a sound like furniture moving across a floor. Then a single thump, dense and final, like a body hitting a wall. Then nothing. At 11 p.m., something came down our street. Multiple footsteps, unhurried, slightly syncopated. I counted at least 4 sets from the sound alone. They stopped in front of Gustavo's house. I couldn't see from the living room, the curtains were sealed, but I could hear them on his porch. The front door opened. It hadn't been locked. They went inside, and I heard the sounds of a house being moved through by things that didn't care about furniture or walls, and then a wet sound I'm not going to describe, and then silence. My mother sat beside me in the dark and held my hand. Not for comfort, for location, so each of us knew exactly where the other was without needing to speak. They left Gustavo's house around 1 in the morning. I heard them on the street, moving west this time. And then they were gone, and the neighborhood was silent again, except for a dog barking somewhere far to the north, desperate and rhythmic. And then that stopped too. In the morning, I went upstairs and looked at Gustavo's house from the window. The front door was still open. The curtains in the upstairs bedroom were torn. There was something on the porch that might have been a dish towel or might have been something else, and I didn't look long enough to decide which. My mother didn't say, "I told him so." She didn't say anything about Gustavo. She went to the basement and adjusted our ration schedule, cutting portions by a third. And when I asked why, she said, "Because now I'm planning for 4 weeks instead of 3, and because your brother might bring people." Urbano didn't come that day, or the next. On Thursday, day 11, day 8 of my stay, something changed in the pattern. The fasting ones that had been drifting through the neighborhood in loose, individual paths started clustering. Not packs, exactly, but groups of 3 or 4 that moved in the same direction at the same pace. They were heading south, toward the lake, and they were doing it during the day, which was new. Until then, they'd been mostly twilight and nighttime movers. The daylight movement meant something had shifted. Some threshold had been crossed, and my mother noted it in her composition book with a single underlined word: bold. That afternoon, someone knocked on our front door. My mother and I were in the basement. We froze. Roque, who had been sleeping in his carrier, lifted his head, and his ears rotated forward. The knock came again, 3 knocks, then a pause, then 2 more. A human pattern, deliberate. I went upstairs alone, staying low, and looked through the peephole. A woman stood on the porch, short, dark hair, maybe 40, wearing a navy jacket with something on the sleeve I couldn't make out through the distorted lens. She was breathing hard. She had a small cut on her forehead, and she was holding her left arm against her body like it hurt. "Bridget," I said through the door, quiet. Her head snapped toward the peephole. "Urbano sent me." "Teddy?" "He said oranges in the closet. He said you'd know." Oranges in the closet. Something only someone in our family would know about. Something stupid and specific. I opened the door and pulled her inside so fast she stumbled. I locked it behind her, threw the deadbolt, and pressed the wet towel back against the gap at the bottom. Bridget Olmeda. Racine paramedic, like Urbano said. The Puerto Rican flag patch was on her right sleeve, partly hidden by dried blood that wasn't hers. She smelled like smoke and antiseptic, and she was shaking, a fine tremor in her hands that she tried to hide by gripping her elbows. "Where's Urbano?" I asked. "He was behind me. We left the station together. We got separated on Kinnickinnick Avenue." She swallowed. There was a group, a big one, maybe 12, and they were just standing in the intersection, all of them facing south. And Urbano said go around, and I went left and he went right, and I didn't. I lost him. I followed the route he drew for me. Back streets. I got here. "How long ago did you separate?" "Hour, maybe hour and a half." My mother appeared at the top of the basement stairs, took one look at Bridget, and said, "Are you bitten, scratched, or were you in contact with fluid from a sick person?" "No, ma'am. The blood is from a patient at the staging area. It dried hours ago." Strip that jacket off and wash your hands and arms with the soap in the bathroom. Teddy, get her the clean shirt from the top of the dryer. Bridget obeyed without argument. When she came back wearing my old Marquette University t-shirt with her forearms red from scrubbing, my mother handed her a portion of cold rice and beans in a Tupperware container and a bottle of water, and said, "Eat in the basement. No smell up here." Over the next 2 hours, Bridget told us what she knew, and it was more than we had. The infection, she called it, the turn, had a progression. First, the olfactory changes. Food smell became repulsive. Then human smell became attractive. Then the photosensitivity. Then the motor changes, the gait, the wrong walking that I'd observed from the window. Then the cognitive decline, personality erasure, the individual becoming part of the larger behavioral pattern. The whole process, from first symptom to full turn, seemed to take between 4 and 7 days. The turned weren't dead. Their hearts beat. They breathed. They bled when cut. But something had changed in what they wanted, fundamentally and completely. And it made them capable of things that the person they'd been would never have done. "The smell thing is real," Bridget said, looking at my mother with something close to awe. "The hospital figured it out by accident. A nurse in the ICU heated up a frozen dinner in the break room microwave, and 3 contained patients broke their restraints within 90 seconds. After that, they banned hot food in the building. I figured it out because I feed people," my mother said. "When you spend your life watching what people want to eat, you notice when the want changes." "How did you know to go cold so early?" My mother was quiet for a moment. Then, Petronella, the woman at my pantry, when she grabbed my wrist and said the food smell made it worse, I believed her. Not because I understood the science, because she was afraid of herself. I've seen that look in people before. When someone tells you they're scared of what they might do, you listen. Bridget nodded slowly. She looked like she wanted to write that down. We settled into a new rhythm, the 3 of us. Bridget's medical knowledge filled gaps my mother's observation couldn't. My catering logistics kept the food system running. I'm good at portioning, at stretching a protein, at knowing which canned goods have the highest calorie-to-weight ratio, and at rotating stock so nothing goes to waste. My mother ran the house like a kitchen during a 12-top service. Every person had a station. Every task had a time. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was loud. Nothing smelled. But we were waiting for Urbano. He didn't come Thursday. He didn't come Friday. On Friday night, I stood in the upstairs hallway outside my mother's bedroom door and listened to her crying, very quietly, into her pillow. She had the composition book open beside her and a pen in her hand, and even in her grief, she was writing. I didn't look at what she wrote. Some things you leave alone, even when the world is ending. Saturday morning, Bridget asked me to help her check on something. She'd seen movement from the upstairs window. Not fasting ones, but a person. A living person, moving with purpose, crouched low, heading south on the sidewalk across the street. She wanted to signal them. "No," my mother said from the basement stairs. "You don't know them. They're alive. They might need help. And they might be 4 days in with the smell still on them and not turned yet, but close." This was the thing my mother understood that the rest of us were still learning. The gap. The 4 to 7 day window between exposure and full turn. During that window, a person looked normal, acted normal, might not even know they were infected, but they were already changing. And if you let them in, you might not know until the change completed, and by then they were inside your sealed house with your sealed food and your sleeping family. Bridget looked at me. I looked at my mother. The three of us stood in that hallway doing a calculation none of us wanted to be making the value of a stranger's life, weighed against the security of our own. And I felt sick, physically sick, the way I feel when a catering job goes wrong and I know the food isn't right, but the guests are already seated. "We watch," I said. "If they come to the door, we talk through it. We ask the same questions you asked Bridget. If they pass, we let them pass." My mother looked at me for a long moment. "You sound like your father," she said. It wasn't a compliment or an insult. It was just a fact, delivered with the weight of someone who had loved that quality and been exhausted by it in equal measure. The person didn't come to our door. They moved south, and we didn't see them again. On Sunday, day 15, day 12 for me, Urbano arrived. He came at 3 in the morning, tapping on the side door in a rhythm I recognized from childhood. Shave and a haircut. I nearly knocked over the card table we'd set up in the hallway getting to the door. When I opened it, my brother was standing there in filthy EMT pants and a hoodie I didn't recognize. And he was carrying a child. A girl, maybe 5 years old, asleep or unconscious, wrapped in a thermal blanket, thin face, dark hair matted to her forehead. She smelled like sweat and rain. "Her name is Araceli," Urbano said. "Her family is gone. I found her in a parked car on Delaware Avenue. She's clean. I've monitored her for 36 hours. No symptoms." My mother took the child from his arms without a word and carried her to the basement. Urbano stood in the hallway and looked at me, and his face collapsed, not dramatically, not with sobs, just a slow sag of every muscle, like a building settling off its foundation. And he leaned against the wall and closed his eyes and said, "It's worse than you think, everywhere. It's everywhere, and it's getting organized." Organized how? They're congregating around food sources, restaurants, grocery stores, anywhere with residual smell. They stand outside in groups and they wait. And when someone inside cooks or opens something with a strong smell, they converge. It's not random anymore. They're learning patience. He told me about the station house, how they'd lost it when someone in the back office heated up coffee, just the smell of coffee, and the 3 turned patients in the holding area went through a reinforced door like it was cardboard. He told me about running south through neighborhoods that were half empty and half occupied by things that used to be neighbors. He told me about the car where he found Araceli, engine off, doors locked, a woman in the driver's seat who was still in gray and whose eyes tracked him through the glass without blinking, and the little girl in the back seat who had pressed herself against the opposite door and hadn't made a sound in what might have been days. The woman? She was turned, or close. She didn't come after me. She just watched. I broke the back window and took the kid, and the woman didn't move. I don't know if that was because she couldn't, or because I don't know. Araceli's mother? Probably. Turned, but still sitting in the car with her daughter. Not attacking, just sitting. I didn't know what to do with that information, and I still don't. My mother came up from the basement. She looked at Urbano, and he looked at her. And she said, "You took 5 extra days." I know. People needed you, and you stayed. Yes. That's your father in you. Again. Not a compliment, not an insult. A diagnosis. My mother loved my father desperately, and he died at 58 from a heart attack he'd been ignoring symptoms of for a year, because other people's problems always came first. She saw it in Urbano, the way she saw the turn in Petronella's eyes early, clearly, without illusion. "Are you hurt?" "Twisted my ankle. It's swollen, but I can walk." "Bridget will look at it. Eat first. Basement." We were 5 now. Me, my mother, Urbano, Bridget, and a 5-year-old girl who hadn't spoken yet. The ration calculation changed. My mother adjusted the notebook without being asked, and the portions got smaller. And I watched her do the math with a pencil stub, her lips moving, and I thought, this is what she was made for. Not the crisis, not the horror, but the management of scarce things for the people in her care. She had been doing this her entire life, stretching a grocery budget across 4 mouths, making Christmas dinner for 12 out of what other people would call a Tuesday pantry, turning someone else's surplus into someone else's meal at the food bank. She was, in the deepest and most literal sense, a person who kept other people alive through food. And now she was doing it by withholding food, by suppressing the things she knew best, by making her kitchen silent. That cost her something. I could see it. The kitchen, her kitchen, the room where she'd spent more hours than any other room in the house, was dark and cold and sealed. And every time she passed through it, I saw her hand drift toward the stove the way a musician's hand drifts toward an instrument, and then pull back, and her face would do something small and terrible and private before she kept walking. Wednesday, day 18. Araceli spoke for the first time. She was sitting in the basement with my mother, who had been quietly talking to her for 3 days straight, not expecting answers, just providing a human voice, a warm presence, the kind of patient attention my mother gave to every scared person who walked into her food pantry. Araceli looked at the Tupperware container of cold rice my mother offered her and said, "It's better warm." My mother's hand trembled. Just once. Then she said, "I know, baby. When it's safe, I'll make you something warm. I promise." That promise sat in the air of that basement like a lit match in a gas-filled room. Because we all knew what it meant. My mother had made warmth and food smell into the enemy. She'd sealed her own identity in plastic and duct tape and silence. And now, this child was asking her to be the thing she'd been her whole life. And she couldn't. I found my mother in the upstairs hallway that night, sitting on the floor with the composition book in her lap, and she was making a list I hadn't seen before. It was labeled "When," and underneath, in her careful handwriting, she'd listed every dish she was going to cook when this was over. Arroz con gandules, pernil, tembleque, tostones, coquito, pasteles. The list went on for 2 pages, and beside each item she'd written a name who it was for. Teddy, Urbano, Araceli, Bridget, Gustavo. She'd included Gustavo. "Ma," I said, "go to sleep, Teddy. He's gone." "I know he's gone. I'm cooking for him anyway. When it's time." I sat down next to her on the hallway floor, and we stayed there without talking. Through the sealed window at the end of the hall, I could see a faint orange glow to the north, something burning in the city. Probably had been burning for days, nobody left to put it out. The glow pulsed and faded like a slow heartbeat. Roque came padding up the stairs and settled between us, and my mother put her hand on his back and he purred. And for a few minutes, the 3 of us sat in the dark in a house that smelled like nothing, in a city that smelled like everything. And that was as close to peace as we were going to get. Thursday morning, Bridget woke us early. She'd been on watch. We rotated 4-hour shifts through the night. 2 hours at the upstairs window, 2 hours at the side door listening, and she'd seen something. A convoy. 3 vehicles, moving north on the street 2 blocks east, headlights off, moving at walking speed. She'd counted at least 6 people visible, armed, organized. "Military?" Urbano asked. "No markings, no uniforms, civilian vehicles, but they're coordinated." We watched from the upstairs window as the convoy reached the end of our cross street and stopped. People got out. They went into houses, not breaking in, knocking, waiting, moving on. They were doing a sweep, house by house, looking for survivors, or supplies, or both. Do we signal them? I asked. No, my mother and Bridget said at the same time. Urbano looked at me. He wanted to signal them. I could see it. His EMT training, his every instinct, told him that organized people with vehicles meant rescue, meant systems, meant someone had a plan. But he'd also spent 2 weeks watching systems fail. And the pause before he spoke was the sound of a man rewriting his assumptions in real time. We wait, he said. We watch what they do. They reached our block an hour later. A man and a woman approached Gustavo's house, went inside, came out carrying boxes, canned goods, water, batteries. They loaded them into a truck and moved to the next house. They weren't rescuing. They were collecting. When they got to our house, the man knocked. Heavy, confident, 3 raps. Anyone inside? We're organizing supplies for a central shelter at the Humboldt Park Field House. If you have excess food, water, or medical supplies, we're asking for contributions. Contributions. My mother's mouth went thin. If you're inside and you need help, we can transport you to the shelter. 47 people so far, secure perimeter, generator, clean water. 47 people and a generator. Cooking facilities, presumably. A place that would smell like food, that would smell like 100 warm bodies, that would glow and hum and broadcast its presence to everything within a mile radius. I looked at my mother. She shook her head. Not a small shake. A definitive, whole-body rejection. We stayed silent. The man knocked twice more, waited, and moved on. After they left, my mother said, "A shelter that size, with a generator and cooking, is a beacon. They're building a buffet and inviting the whole city." "They're trying to help," Urbano said. "They're trying to help in the way that used to work. It doesn't work anymore. Concentration is death now. Big groups, big smells, big noise. Everything we learned before this is backwards." She was right, and Urbano knew she was right. And knowing she was right about this, about everything, about the smell and the cold kitchen and the sealed house, about going dark and small and invisible, knowing all that didn't make it easier to sit in a dark basement and eat cold rice while someone outside offered a generator and a community and the illusion of the world still functioning. That night, Araceli crawled into my mother's lap in the basement and fell asleep there. And my mother held her and looked at me over the child's head and said very quietly, "I stopped cooking to save your lives, and it's the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than your father. Harder than anything. Because cooking is how I tell people I love them. And I had to stop saying it." I couldn't respond. I just sat there on the cold basement floor with my brother beside me, and Bridget dozing against the water heater, and a cat in a carrier, and a little girl asleep in my mother's arms. And I understood finally what she'd given up. Not a hobby, not a habit. Her language, her mother tongue. The thing that made her Dolores Rivas, and not just a woman in a house. She'd amputated it to keep us alive, and she'd done it 3 weeks before anyone else understood why. We stayed in that house for 11 more days. The fasting ones grew more numerous, but their behavior shifted. Bridget observed that they were migrating, moving in a consistent southward pattern, leaving the residential streets emptier by the day. Whether they were heading towards something or away from something, we didn't know. The convoy from Humboldt Park didn't come back. We heard an explosion from the north one night, deep, structural, the kind that vibrates through the floor, and the orange glow brightened and then slowly faded over the next 3 days. On day 29, My mother reopened the composition book to a page I hadn't seen. She'd labeled it Threshold, and it contained a calculation. When the visible density of fasting ones on our street dropped below 2 sightings per day for 3 consecutive days, we would begin preparing to move. She'd written this calculation on day 4 of her cold kitchen, 3 weeks before I arrived. She'd been planning the exit before she'd finished building the shelter. We hit her threshold on a Tuesday, 2 days with 0 sightings. 1 sighting on the 3rd day, a single figure, moving fast and south. Not pausing, not hunting, just transiting. Close enough. Bridget and Urbano scouted a route south to the lakefront, where Urbano had seen boats moored at the marina on his way to us. My mother packed the remaining food into backpacks with ruthless efficiency, calorie density prioritized, luxury items left behind, the Tupperware containers she'd spent a decade collecting stacked neatly on the basement shelf like they were waiting for her to come back. We left at 4 in the morning, moving in a line. Urbano first, then Bridget carrying Araceli, then me, then my mother. Roque was in a carrier on my back with a towel over it. We moved through the streets my mother had mapped in her composition book, following a route she'd drawn in red pen that avoided every food source, every restaurant, every grocery store, every house where she'd noted activity. The route added 6 blocks to the walk, but we passed through streets that were empty, truly empty, not even fasting ones, because there was nothing there to draw them. At the marina, we found a 26-foot sailboat with the keys still in the cabin. Urbano knew enough to motor us out. Our father had kept a boat on the lake when we were kids, another thing I hadn't paid enough attention to at the time. We headed south along the shoreline, engine low, running lights off, the city a dark mass behind us, with that faint orange pulse still glowing somewhere in its center. We anchored off a breakwater near a small harbor town I won't name, because people are still there and they don't need attention. There were others. A few boats, a few families, a small group that had set up on the harbor wall with a system of nets and hand signals and a list of rules printed on a board at the dock. The first rule was, no cooking above deck, cold food only in open air. My mother read that sign and turned to me, and I saw something in her face I'd never seen before. Not vindication, not pride, but recognition. Someone else had figured it out. Someone else had watched and listened and understood what the smell of a warm meal meant now. And they'd built a rule around it. And the rule was keeping people alive. We've been here for a while now. I'm not going to say how long or exactly where. The harbor group has grown to around 30 people, and we've organized around my mother's principles, which is strange and right and painful all at once. Cold food, no open-air cooking, sealed preparation below deck or in enclosed structures with ventilation routed through charcoal filters that Bridget designed from fish smoker parts. We eat well. Actually, my mother and I have been working together in the galley of a houseboat someone donated to the community kitchen. And it turns out that a lifetime of cooking knowledge is just as valuable when you're engineering around the constraint of producing 0 detectable smell. We've invented a cuisine of necessity. Cold smoked fish using a sealed cabinet, fermented vegetables that we jar underwater. Rice cooked in a pressure vessel with the steam captured and condensed. My mother's hands are busy again. Her language is coming back, altered but alive. Araceli calls her abuela now. My mother doesn't correct her. Urbano runs the medical station with Bridget. His ankle healed wrong, a slight limp he'll carry forward. And sometimes I catch him standing at the harbor wall, looking north toward the city with an expression I recognize because I've seen it in my own face. The awareness that we got out because one woman stopped cooking 3 weeks before the world understood why. and the weight of everyone who didn't have a Dolores Rivas in their kitchen watching them, with 63 years of knowing what hunger looks like when it changes shape. Yesterday, my mother asked me to help her with something. She took me to the community kitchen, the houseboat galley, sealed and filtered, our little scentless cathedral, and she opened the composition book to the when list, the one with the dishes and the names. "We're not there yet," she said, "but I want to start practicing. In here, with the filters running. The food won't go to waste, the group needs calories. But I need to remember how the sofrito smells when the onions are right. I need my hands to remember." So we cooked. For the first time in over a month, my mother and I stood side by side in a kitchen and cooked. Really cooked. Heat and oil and garlic and the small sounds of a knife on a board and a spoon in a pot. And the smell stayed inside the sealed galley and went nowhere. And my mother tasted the sofrito from the wooden spoon she'd brought from Clement Avenue and closed her eyes. And didn't say anything for a long time. Araceli was sitting on the galley counter, eating a cold tortilla and watching us, and she said, "It smells like before." My mother opened her eyes and looked at that little girl and said, "Not yet, but closer." Tonight we're eating together, the whole group, all 30 of us, below deck in the main cabin of the big charter boat someone dragged to the pier. Cold dishes and the pressure-cooked rice and the sealed galley sofritos spooned over everything. And it won't smell like my mother's kitchen on Clement Avenue. Not the way it used to. Not with the windows open and the steam rising and the whole block knowing Dolores Rivas was making pernil. But we're sitting together. The food is real. The people are alive. And my mother is moving through the room with a serving spoon, checking plates, adjusting portions, making sure the children eat first, managing the meal the way she's always managed every meal with her whole self. Every decision, a small act of love disguised as logistics. I'm watching her from across the cabin, and Urbano is beside me with his bad ankle propped on a cooler, and Bridget is showing Araceli how to fold a napkin into a bird. And outside the harbor is dark, and the water is quiet, and somewhere north the city is still burning or not burning. And the fasting ones are still out there, doing whatever they do when there's nothing left to smell. My mother stopped cooking for the first time in 30 years, and she was right to stop. And when she started again, she did it differently. And that difference is keeping all of us alive. I don't know what comes next. None of us do. But the food is warm tonight, inside a sealed room with the filters running, and everyone is here. And my mother is telling Araceli to finish her rice.